folks, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So hi to everybody in the room. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Margaret Stuckey. I am the Director of Community Impact for United Way of Southwestern Indiana. I know you can't see me, but we've got some of the regular camera and mic features disabled on this for the webinar setting. Please bear with us. This technology is a little new. It's our first time doing this type of session. The benefit is we're going to be able to record this and we will be sharing the link with everybody. So we can go ahead and get started. And one other thing to mention is please, refrain from putting your questions in the chat until the end of the session. We will have time for Q&A and the chat feature is available for the questions, but please just hold off. We will not be able to field that chat back and forth throughout the presentation. We'll just hold off to the end. Okay, so we can go ahead and jump right in. I know that everybody is here to talk about social stability and growth, and we will get there. But before we dive into talking about this grant in particular, I wanted to just give a little bit of context about United Way in general, particularly for partners who have not worked with us before. So the historic model of United Way allowed us to work with a small portfolio of partner organizations and provide funding to them. And that model served us well for many years, but after listening to the community, to our stakeholders, we found that there was a much broader network of nonprofits out there doing work in the community that we had not been able to engage with. And so after listening to our stakeholders, our donors, our community members, we took about 3 years of community listening and strategic planning time and ultimately decided to make a pretty big shift towards competitive open grant making. So this is still relatively new for United Way, and it may be new for you as a nonprofit to think about interacting with United Way in that way. So this is what we call our pathway grant cycle. We have several different pathway grants. Things that you should know about this: they are open to any 501c3 in our service area. That's Vandenberg, Warwick, and Spencer counties. They are multi-year grants, so between 24th and 30-month grants. And it is our intention to veer a little bit from the previous United Way model of making perhaps a little bit smaller contributions to many, many organizations. Our model now will be to make fewer but larger, more impactful grants. And the other thing that you should know about United Way's model overall is that we have a single focus. We have one priority issue, and that is upward mobility, aka poverty reduction, supports to the ALIS population, upward mobility. So we have a webinar full of people who have dedicated their professional lives to service on this call, and particularly service to low-income people. So nothing I'm going to say here is going to be particularly surprising to any of you guys who are in the work. We all know that poverty is complex. Poverty is multifaceted. There is no single silver bullet, quick fix to reducing poverty in a community. And that's why we have created pathway strategies. These are 4 different distinct areas that research shows if we invest in these areas, this can help reduce poverty at a community level over time. So I'll start a little bit out of order here. I'm going to jump in with empowering employment. I call that the ODA pathway. It is certainly the most obvious. For people to rise up out of poverty, they do need living wage employment, and they do need help overcoming their barriers to employment. That might be childcare, that might be transportation or other legal barriers. So this is certainly the most obvious place to start when you talk about poverty reduction, but it's certainly not the place to end. And I'd also say this is really our only pathway that is really oriented in a short-term view of poverty and short-term returns. Now, the other 3 pathways are where we start thinking about a little bit longer interventions and turnaround for impacting poverty over time. Our second pathway grant that we made was in mental health. And there is a lot of research that shows people who are living in poverty or people in the ALIS population are more likely to experience ACEs or trauma that may impact their mental health than the general population or middle or higher income people. And we know that And because research shows us that if you are struggling with your mental health, if you are struggling with trauma, you're not going to have the capacity to focus on moving forward economically, moving forward on those larger goals. And so supporting people's mental health is really foundational for empowering them to rise up out of poverty. The third pathway grant that we made is really very much focused on children and youth. We know that kids who are born into and raised in poverty are much more likely to be in poverty as adults. And so we really want to focus on education as a lever to help support children, especially those who are living in poverty as children, to help them break cycles of generational poverty. And we really lean on our educators, our school systems, and our partner nonprofits who work within a school setting, supporting schools to do that. And then our final pathway, this is going to be our fourth pathway grant that we make. That's the one that we are all here to talk about today, social stability and growth. Social stability and growth. What are we here to actually talk about today? So just think to yourselves a little bit about this. What kind of personal characteristic is associated with poorer than average physical health outcomes across many dimensions, and poorer than average mental health outcomes across many dimensions, and higher rates of substance abuse than average, higher rates of youth suicide than average, higher rates of incarceration than average, and just many, many other negative life outcomes. And if you are thinking poverty is the common thread, it is that variable that is associated with all of these other negative things, you're right. You are absolutely right. But there's another one that I think is also really important for us to call out. There's another factor that is similarly linked to many of these same negative health and life outcomes. And that is being socially isolated. Being socially isolated, likewise, is associated with a lot of very negative outcomes for people and across many dimensions. And so if you stop and think about it, you think about a client that you know, someone who is both poor, someone who is struggling in poverty, and someone who has very limited social resources. They're a very isolated person. How much is the deck stacked against that person? What are the odds of that person being successful? It's a very, very difficult position for a person to be in. And so that's what we want to focus on today. There is a lot of research that shows, and it really is two-directional, it shows both sides of the coin. The people who are able to transition out of poverty, the people who do become upwardly mobile, they're more likely than their peers to have networks of relationships with people who are different than themselves, people who may offer unique knowledge, unique perspective. These may be people who serve as a mentor in their life or a coach, or they may be less formal relationships, but they bring a unique perspective that can help empower that person to grow. We also know that the reverse is true. People who are socially isolated are much less likely to be able to pull themselves up, become upwardly mobile, and make that progress towards independence in their life. So that is the overall purpose that we're here to talk about today. United Way, through this grant, is seeking to invest in nonprofit programs that support people's social functioning. And that could look different for different programs. Some of them may focus very much on strengthening the relationships that are already there for the client, the naturally occurring relationships that exist in that person's life, whether that's their family, their friends, their neighbors, their coworkers. They already have some social assets, and this program may come in to help really strengthen those resources for them. It's a wonderful way to support a client. Likewise, another approach may be that a program may help create new relationships for a person, or help foster or introduce them to new relationships. potentially with people who they wouldn't have the opportunity to connect with otherwise, people who may be different than them and bring new knowledge or insight that will help the program client grow and ultimately sort of achieve that upper mobility. Those are the real priorities of this grant. Now, we'd also like to say programs that are able to think about both of these dimensions of the client's social needs, that would be even higher priority. But these are kind of the two categories that we are breaking it down into. Okay, so grant scope, and we could really just even call this grant eligibility. This is the most basic, just to be able to apply for the grants kind of stuff that you would need. So first and foremost, you do need to be a 501c3 in order to apply for this grant, and you do need to be working within United Way's service areas. Again, that's Vandenberg, Warwick, or Spencer County. We should also call out that United Way funding is restricted for use in our service area. So for instance, if you serve, your program is serving people regionally, perhaps you're serving, Vandenberg and Warwick and Gibson and Posey. That's wonderful. We certainly welcome you to apply, but United Way funds that you would receive if you got a grant through this are restricted for use in our service area. We'd also like to call out when you are providing data on your grant proposal application, please keep your data focused to the United Way service area. So for instance, if you served 150 people last year and 50 of them were in Gibson County and 100 of them were in Warwick County, please just focus on the numbers that support that 100 in Warwick County, the service that is going on in United Way's service area. So that's kind of eligibility number one. Eligibility in scope number two, this work is meant to support low-income people. That is the entire point. So if you run a program that is for a more mixed income audience, that is okay, but we would certainly require that a majority of the work be dedicated to low-income people. And when we say low-income people, we've defined it in a particular way. Obviously, anyone who is within technical poverty, below the poverty line, it would certainly include them. But we've also sort of generously defined that as up to 185% of the federal poverty line based on their household size. So that would be, yes, the poverty population, but then also inclusive of that larger ALICE population as well. So really needed to be focusing the service to that demographic. Now, the third point on grant scope that I want to talk about a little bit today, and I think there is some nuance here. So I wanted to just make sure we talked about this with some examples. Non-discrimination of service. So we know that oftentimes this type of social support and relationship building work, it can take place in a variety of settings. Maybe not always your traditional nonprofit social service type of setting. There are many other types of settings where this type of work would go on. Particularly faith communities are ones that are noted in research, noted to be places where this type of relationship building occurs, and that's wonderful. United Way has not traditionally funded faith communities directly, but this may be an opportunity where that could be appropriate. Now, that being said, we want to talk about this value of non-discrimination and what we mean by that. So first of all, when we talk about group membership, that's important to consider. So if you can say, yes, our program is run out of a faith community, our program is run out of a Pentecostal church, and we're really focused on our community. And so in order to be eligible for our program, you need to be a Pentecostal person, you need to be a member of our parish. If that sounds like you, we would say, best of luck, we wish you well, you are not eligible to apply for this grant. Similarly, if you say, because of our religious beliefs, we care very, very much about serving poor people, but we do not serve people who are gay or trans or non-Christian or fill in the blank. Again, we wish you all the best, but you are not eligible to apply for this grant, if that sounds like you. Conversely, we will say, when talking about your program, if you can say, we don't turn folks away based on their membership of any particular group, But we do, when resources are limited, we do prioritize giving our service to folks who are veterans or previously incarcerated or people of color or whatever particular group, not because we're trying to discriminate against other people, but because we know members of this group are likely to face barriers in their upward mobility. And so we make it our business to seek them out, and we make it our business to make sure we're serving those people. If that sounds like you are more than welcome to apply for this grant. That is not something we would consider discriminatory. That is in fact something that we would certainly endorse and welcome. All right, so that was the kind of basic standard eligibility type of conversation points we wanted to address. Now we can talk more about the priority of the grant. And again, if you don't feel that you 100% meet all of these things, that's okay. You may certainly still be eligible to apply, but these are the real priorities. So as we discussed before, a holistic approach to supporting client social needs. So supporting those existing relationships, family, neighborhood, friends, supporting people with that existing social asset is wonderful. Fostering and building new relationships that bring new value to the client's life, also very important for service. Programs that can speak to both of those things simultaneously, that is a priority for us. That is something that we would consider really worthy of our interest for funding. Second grant priority that I wanted to address is service to families. This is a priority for us, particularly what we would call a 2-gen approach. And I wanted to talk about this because sometimes there's a little bit of question. Well, hey, what counts as 2-gen? What do you mean by 2-gen? Obviously, if you were providing direct services to both children and parents, or children and grandparents in a family, if you're directly working with both of those as clients of the program, then by all means, you are a 2-gen approach program. But there may be other ways to look like a 2-gen type of program. So for instance, if you're working with people who are actively parenting or raising children, and the service you're providing is supporting them and helping them to be more stable, supportive parents, you could argue in a way that that is a 2-gen approach. So it's thinking a little bit bigger picture about the way that you interact with and serve families. And the final priority, what we just discussed before, an equity approach to service, an equity approach to service. So again, discrimination is not cool, but thoughtfully discerning who you dedicate your precious resources to with an understanding of systemic inequity, that is cool. That is more than cool. That is priority for us. Other details to move into. The minimum request for this grant is $50,000. So if you are a smaller organization, or this is a program that's just getting spun up and you're looking for $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 to seed things, this is not necessarily the right opportunity for you. This is something that's a little bit larger, more substantial for hopefully programs that are either well established or a very supported and well thought out pilot. There is no formal cap. There is no maximum request amount. So you are allowed to put whatever amount that you feel is appropriate. However, you are going to be asked to provide a detailed line item spending plan for that funds. So please don't throw out, some crazy enormous number and then not really have a cohesive idea of what you're going to use it on. You will need to account for every dollar that you request. So that is something to consider. Another thing to be aware of, the number of awards that United Way plans to make for this grant is not fixed. That is really going to depend upon the proposals that we receive. And the fit with this purpose and the quality that we just assess them to be. We will do everything that we can. We do have limited resources for this grant, but we will do everything we can to make the best investments possible with the money that we do have to grant make. So, speaking of making the best investments possible, I wanted to show this as an example. This is just an example of what we call an impact graph at United Way, and this is how your proposal is going to be evaluated. So we do evaluate your proposal on two sort of axes. You'll receive 2 scores for your proposal, and it's the intersection of those 2 scores that kind of make up your final placement on the impact graph. So the first axis that we'll talk about, this vertical axis, program efficiency, that is that's more of the kind of cut and dry quantitative side of the grant. So things that would be factored into your score here are things like your ratio of direct and indirect expenses, so the quantified service to our target group, or the quantified service to a priority geography. So those things. The major driving factor for your score on program efficiency is your ratio of request to served clients. So the ratio of request to served clients. Now, if you run a very intensive, high-touch program that needs a lot of money to serve not very many people, don't panic. All right, this may not be the metric where you shine, but that's okay. If you are providing a very intensive and comprehensive service, then you more likely will have an elevated position on this other axis, and this is our program fit. And sometimes we say program quality and fit type of score. This one is not necessarily the completely cut and dry numbers that we pull straight from your proposal. This is the one that is more assessed along our rubric. And I will, before we jump into looking at the rubric, I will say we consider both of these things. United Way, and when our board comes together to make final funding decisions, we do consider both of these factors, but I will just say, based from experience, that our board is probably more interested in funding a little bit of something that is highly exceptional quality rather than a lot of something that is maybe not the best fit with this grant purpose. That tends to be the perspective of United Way's grant making, but we do recognize the importance of both of these factors. So, jumping into more of the details of that program fit score that you will receive, the application is broken down into different sections, and you can see here the different point weight that is given to each section of the application. So I should back up and say, how did we even get this application? Well, with all United Way Pathway grants, we form what we call our expert task force. And this is a group of all volunteered folks. They're not United Way staff. These are volunteer folks who help us write the application itself and then the corresponding rubric that is used to score the application. And these people are what we consider content and context experts. So for our mental health grant, we had mental health practitioners, we had clinicians, therapists, psychologists, were the folks who helped write the application and write the scoring rubric. For our Thriving Next Gen grant, it was all about supporting education, so it was all about having educators lead that process. We had teachers, principals, school counselors. Those were the folks who helped us develop the application questions and helped us figure out how to score them. For this expert task force, it was a little bit more diverse, and I think that's a good thing. We were looking for people who had deep expertise in the nonprofit landscape, but who were not themselves going to be seeking this grant. We had leaders of different faith communities. We had academics who have studied social capital and other concepts that are relevant to this work. We have leaders of educational institutions, local government leaders, and folks who are sort of first line responders and boots on the ground within social services. So it's been an interesting group of people, wonderful experts who have brought their experience to help shape this application. We've also had, and again, we're not perfect at this, we are trying to get better. We've also had context experts, so people who themselves have lived experience of poverty, of being in poverty and working to become upwardly mobile. So folks with that type of experience also were involved in helping create the application and help us ask the right questions and evaluate them in the right way. So these are the different categories, sections of the application itself. You will see the program model. That's the, one of the lower point-wise values. This is just the very basic who, what, why, when, where of your program. You're encouraged to kind of keep your responses on these high level and brief. The next section, participants, you can see that's more heavily weighted. And this sort of dives into the details, the demographics and the profiles of the people that your program serves, or that you intend to serve with this investment, or you intend to serve as you launch your pilot. I'll jump forward to the last one here. This is the application section related to your funding request. This is just a little bit of a sniff test to make sure that it is a reasonable request. The use of the funds seems related to the program work and furthering the program work. You're not like trying to buy a boat or anything. So just making sure that that is appropriate. And you can see here, social stability and growth, that is by far the largest point-wise section of the application. Social stability and growth, highest point, like we wanted to say before. On the previous slide, we showed the kind of broad categories of the application. This is the drill down one level deeper. So these are the evaluation criteria that the rubric is made up of. And you can see there are multiple criteria in each of those sections, the most being under social stability and growth. Now, if you look at these and you drill down another section, you would be exactly on the application. So there are between 2 and 4 questions on the application that roll up to each of these evaluation criteria, and that our reviewers will be able to read and assign points to assess your overall point value on each of these evaluation criteria. I do think this is a good opportunity to say, if you were looking at this and you think, oh my gosh, there is no single program that is going to check every single box and get 100% of the points on every single box there. You're right, and that's true, and that's fine. We do not expect every single program to hit every single target here and have 100% of points. That's okay. So if you are looking at this and you say, gosh, there are a few on there I just don't know if we can speak to, that is fine. Don't be scared off. But if you're looking at this and you're thinking, wow, most of that doesn't really sound like our program, then this just might not be the grant for you. All right, so as you can see, the social stability and growth section is the most heavily weighted section. And within that, the theory of change is the heaviest bit of points within that section. So most of you have probably written grants before that have asked for a theory of change. If you haven't, I think it's worth just briefly talking through the structure that we're expecting to see. Your theory of change, you're going to really articulate why you feel your program has value and related to this purpose. So the if, you're going to give very specific details of the interventions that your program is offering to clients. You're going to give very explicit details on the changes you anticipate seeing in your clients based on their participation in your program. And the because is your evidence of the link between these two things. So why do you believe if you do your program, you will get that benefit in a client? This is where you kind of plead your case, and there's really only 2 ways that you can do that. You can lean on your historical data. You can lean on your historical success measures and tout that as a way of demonstrating your effectiveness. Or, particularly if you're proposing a pilot, you can highlight research from the field that associates proven promising practices and how you and your model use them. If they are strongly associated in the literature to be effective, then that is certainly something that strengthens your case. So you will certainly have to do one or both, hopefully both of those things, to articulate why you feel that your program is effective. Now, we should also say, we do not want just any old theory of change that you have copy pasted from a previous grant. We want a theory of change that is related to this particular grant's purpose. So if you say our if is we're going to give clients diet pills and then is they're going to lose 20 pounds and here's the data that backs that up, we'll say awesome, great theory of change. Unfortunately, it is not relevant to what we were talking about. Really need to keep the focus, as we said, keyword of social stability and growth is social. So keep the focus of your theory of change around the social and relationship benefits that clients in your program will obtain and how those benefits sort of blossom into empowerment towards upward mobility. That's the real link that we want to tease out. So we know a lot of programs are different. There is no single outcome that everyone would be able to speak to. We know that. These things are complex. So we wanted to offer up just a few example outcomes to kind of frame how you think about your program, how you think about how you'd want to tee up a theory of change that's related to this grant purpose. Now, this is not meant to be an exhaustive list. This is just some examples that we wanted to share with you, but start thinking about your program in terms of this type of relationship-oriented perspective that does kind of come to fruition in steps towards upward mobility. And next thing to talk about. So for pathway grants, sometimes we have the opportunity to take things a little bit further, which I'm very excited about. And you can tell we do try to take data and evaluation seriously. And so one of the things that I'm excited to get to tell you about this grant is in addition to programmatic funding, awarded grantees will also have the opportunity to work with our evaluation partners at Deal Consulting Group for program evaluation services, and United Way will pay for the full cost of your program's evaluation with Deal Consulting Group. We believe that this will be an additional benefit to our grantees. You will receive customized evaluation services. You'll get to work with them directly in figuring out how best to evaluate your program and what data collection might serve that. And we know that this type of strong evaluation data, this is the best possible tool for fundraising, for future grant writing, and sustaining your program in the future with other types of revenue. So we do hope that you consider this a very important benefit that you may receive if you are awarded a pathway grant. All right, so that's most of the kind of content that I wanted to make sure we covered today. I don't want to take too much time of this, but I did want to just talk through the little logistics of actually accessing the grant, especially for those of you who've not interacted with United Way's grant making before. In order to access our grant, you do need to check out our website, unitedwayswi.org. Scroll down to the footer and there you will see there is a login button for EC Impact. And then you can click here to log in as a nonprofit who's applying for a grant. Don't try to log in as a reviewer. There are two different links there. Another important thing to call out. So many of you have at least seen this because this is the portal that you interacted with to apply for COVID relief funds. If you have only ever gotten United Way funding through COVID relief, you are going to need to create a new account. If you're a legacy partner or you've applied to other pathway grants, then your account will be existing in there. But if you've only ever just applied for COVID relief funds, those accounts are no longer active. You will need to create a new one. So once you are inside your account, this is a two-step process accessing the grant. So make sure you come over here to the left vertical sidebar, register for new grant opportunities. Two-step process, you'll see here social stability and growth. Click through. The first step of the process is associating your organization with the grant. Once you have associated your organization with the grant, this is what your home screen for the grant will look like. You'll get these first three links, and this is for your organizational level data. But if you are here, you are not done. There are more steps. You're going to need to use this section here to associate your program with the grant as well. So if you're a legacy partner or you're applying on behalf of a program that we've funded previously or have applied for grants with us previously, it may be here in the drop-down menu and you could just assign it directly. If not, most of you will need to use this link to create a new program and associate it with this grant application. Now, when you do that, there is an eligibility screener. So you will see, like we said, the high-level scope criteria that we talked through. Service to our Vandenberg, Warwick, and/or Spencer counties. Oops. Whoop. The majority of service going to low-income people and the non-discrimination that we discussed before. So you need to be able to answer all of those. Assuming that you fit those criteria, you will be given access to the full grant. So you will have both the forms associated with the organizational level of application and the program level of application. Let's see here. And okay, move forward ahead. Now, one last thing for the EC impact stuff to show you. If you again go over to your left hand vertical sidebar, that is where you'll find the resource center. So you should have resources available to you for social stability and growth. That's where you're going to find some of the examples related to DO consulting and any potential engagement with them. We also have the grant purpose statement, and up here, this is the document I strongly encourage you to go in and get a hold of. We know nobody likes writing grants directly in a grant portal, so we give you the full application document in an editable format so you can do drafting outside of the portal. I'd really encourage you just to pull this down, download it, look at it, because this will have additional guidance, particularly on the theory of change. We will list all of those example outcomes for you. That's not necessarily something that's going to be visible within EC Impact alone. So we strongly encourage you to go in and use this document for your drafting as you're creating your proposal. Next thing, some general instructions for the grant overall as you are completing your proposal. So general instruction number one, I know this is probably listed on the top of every single form. Please keep your responses concise. There are no bonus points for being long-winded, so please keep things brief. The theory of change is where I will say you can really stretch your legs, but for other narratives, brevity is valued. Another important general instruction for all sections of the grant. You know, as a principle, United Way wants all of our competitive grants to be as fair and impartial as possible. And one way we attempt to make things more fair is by doing blind grant review. So when we receive a proposal, we will redact all names and all identifying information from the proposal before it's sent on to the review committee. And this is just meant to eliminate bias when possible. This way nobody is coasting on brand recognition or previous exposure to United Way. Naturally, we know some programs are fairly unique within our community or very easily identifiable. There's kind of no avoiding that. But this is just one step that we take to try to eliminate bias where we can, or at least reduced bias. So please, if at all possible, throughout your proposal, avoid using the proper names of your organization and your program, because we're just going to have to redact them all anyway. So little note on that. Also note if you are applying as a collaborative and you're having multiple programs or multiple organizations associated with your proposal, you're going to need to refer to these entities throughout the proposal as Organization 1 and Program 1 or Organization 2, Organization 3. I would really encourage you within the program model section and narratives to just give a very concise, even bullet pointed kind of key on that to say Organization 1 provides this program with services A, B, and C, and give a little description of what that player brings to the collaborative. So that can be kind of a little key for reviewers when they're reading through that stuff. All right, and the final thing that we will kind of cover before we open things up for Q&A is office hours. So this is something that I like to do. United Way grants, we don't want them to be a black box. We want to be as transparent as we possibly can be. And that means we are willing to talk to you throughout this process. So we have dedicated office hours. We will send out a link and reminder emails, so you'll have the opportunity to sign up for these appointments. And these are for having, you know, a more in-depth conversation with United Way staff regarding your proposal idea or a potential collaborative idea, or if you have specific questions about a section of the grant, this is a great place where we can kind of just touch base and talk one-on-one. Of course, if you have just a simple question, you're having problems getting into EC Impact, or some small thing, you can email me or call me at any time and I'll get back to you. But if you'd like to have more of that one-on-one conversation, this is your opportunity. Also, I should say, if your schedule is crazy packed and none of these times worked for you, that's fine. Please just email me and we'll work something else out. But these are our first line of defense for talking with grantees. So, okay, that is pretty much all the material that we wanted to cover and make it through. We've done that pretty quickly in less than an hour, which is awesome. So we've got time here to kind of open it up, and we've got somebody here working the chat box. So we have the chat feature enabled for you. Oh, and I think a camera is turning on. Hi, folks. You haven't been able to see me up till now. Hello. Okay, we've got a chat turned on. So if you have questions, pop them in the chat and we'll try to address those as we get them. So we've got folks looking at our chat here. Oh, when's the deadline? Oh my gosh, really, really good question. Thank you, Catherine. Oh my gosh, I apologize, you guys, I missed that. The deadline for the grant, really key information for you to know, is May 9th. I think that's a Tuesday, May 9th at 5 p.m. Central Time. So the EC Impact portal will close automatically at that time, so we're not able to accept late proposals. Please mark your calendars, May 9th. Really important question. Thank you for asking that. Sorry, I forgot to mention that before. All right, if there are other questions, I will stick around here on the Teams meeting for a little bit longer in case people do have more questions. If not, we welcome you to dive into EC Impact. And next question, can the webinar be looked up again? Yes, it can. We have been recording this, and we're going to send out a follow-up email to everybody who was registered for this presentation, and that will have the link to the recording, the link to signing up for office hours if you would like to, and the editable full application document. Oh, and one little other note, we will send you the full application in the editable document, but you do have to copy paste it and get it into EC Impact to actually submit it. We will not accept them in the Word document for a final submission. Okay, what is the exact link to pull for the grant? So in order to access the grant, you will need to log into our portal with those steps that we just showed in order to get it and register your organization. And let's see, when does the grant open? It is open as of right now. It is open today. And is the PowerPoint available? We can send out the PowerPoint in a PDF document along with that follow-up email and the registration, so you can reference the slides or the recording either way. And we'll have those resources up on the website as well. You're welcome, Dee. Okay, if anybody has other questions, please, you can reference our website, unitedwayswi.org, Pathway Grants. You can always reach out to me. My email address will be available. And we're going to pop that into the chat right now. It's mstuckey@unitedwayswi.org. And we will get this follow-up email to all of you, probably going out tomorrow after we get that recording up on our website. And we have another question here. Haven't seen the grant. Oh, yes, there are word limits built into this grant. They are noted on the editable version that we will send to you, and they are noted in the portal itself. So yes, there are word limits on the responses. Good question. All right, well, thanks everybody. I guess we can get to give you back a little bit of time today. Glad we were able to get through everything fairly quickly. Again, please reach out if you have more questions. And we're really excited to get to see your proposals. Thanks, everybody.